one of the things we're talking to owners about who are going away with their cats is they've got to obviously ensure that they don't let them out, because I think people feel that, because they travel with their dogs, they can let them in the garden. They cannot do that with cats.
Yeah, no, that is... I have heard of maybe 2 or 3 cats in my lifetime that people have managed to take on holiday with them. They open the door at the caravan park and the cat doesn't leave. And my mind is blown.
Unless you can put them on a harness and lead.
That is not the norm. So taking a cat to another place and letting them go, you're basically just setting them free to never see them again. So yes, harnesses and leashes on a cat. I would test that to high heavens before you go anywhere, because cats are masters of getting out of things. So yeah, I wouldn't advise taking cats on holidays unless you have one of those 3 cats in the world that just gets out the car and doesn't go anywhere.
Welcome back to the Pause and Effect podcast and to our special series, Ask the Professionals, where we tap into expert advice to make pet ownership a little bit easier. I'm your host, Dr. Cara, and today we're joined by a familiar face here at Hillcrest Veterinary Hospital, Sister Cat. As a veterinary nurse, Sister Cat spends a lot of time talking with pet owners about the challenges and the joys of having pets. And today she's here to help us navigate one of the areas that can be quite tricky for many pet owners, and that's traveling with pets. We're going to be discussing all the practical do's and don'ts, from preparing your pet for travel to keeping them safe and comfortable on the journey itself. If you've enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe. It helps us continue bringing you expert tips to keep your pets thriving. A very warm welcome to Sister Cat. Thank you. I've pulled you out of consults. Yeah, it's been quite a morning for you. You haven't even eaten.
No, not yet. Lunch will be later today.
Thank you.
No worries.
Yeah. So I know this is something you tackle all the time in your consults because, hey, you're giving advice every day.
Yeah.
That is traveling with your pet. Mm-hmm. So today I wanted us to talk about the do's and don'ts. People are planning holidays, they want to go away for Christmas, and it's a good time for us to talk about how people can best prepare for that journey. Particularly, most people are obviously shifting their dogs or cats into the car, but obviously now with airport travel as well as an option.
No, exactly.
It's a relevant topic. So I suppose before we hit the road, excuse the pun, let's talk about deciding whether your pet is a candidate for traveling. So can we start with that?
Mm-hmm. So, look, obviously, ideally, all car training, travel training, all of that should ideally start as a puppy. And 90% of the time, you'd be bringing those puppies in for vaccinations anyway. So they should, at some point, be used to car travel. But for example's sake, if you do have have adopted an older dog or inherited an older animal, there might be certain personality traits or anxious type of behaviors that do not suit traveling, especially if we are also going by plane, as mentioned. So, there are now domestic flights available for pets to even travel in the cabin with you. So that's really awesome. But once again, if you've got an incredibly anxious, nervous dog, they are not going to allow that animal to fly. And even in the cargo hold, anxious animals that require sedation are also not allowed to travel, because they do not allow sedation any longer for pets to fly.
And that's obviously to protect them from any respiratory or cardiac issues happening during the flight. You don't want to lose your pet when you're traveling.
Same as with people. The altitude changes. A lot of mechanics in your body start changing. And a sedated animal is at a much higher risk of something going wrong. Sorry, lost my train of thought. Just at a much higher risk of something going wrong, and a very high risk of passing at those altitudes if sedated. So all of the sort of airport companies have disallowed sedation of any sort for animals flying.
So let's also talk about our geriatric patients. When would you advise that potentially we're saying, look, they're probably too old to travel?
So, with geriatric patients, obviously heart issues come to mind, respiratory distress, old lungs. They might have sort of chronic bronchitis, anything to that effect, but particularly heart and sort of vascular conditions are of high concern, and those patients should also definitely be a no-no for flying, and even car travel, long trips would probably be a lot for them to handle. So that would definitely need to pass a vet for sort of whether it is a good idea or a bad idea, or is there medication that we can use for car travel to make it less sort of dangerous for the patient in that sense.
Okay. And what about the ones that are, say, arthritically sore? How do you generally advise owners go about if they need to say, this is not really an option, they have to get their geriatric painful dog somewhere? Sort of what's the best advice in terms of managing that?
So ideally, obviously, if they have been diagnosed with arthritic conditions, they should be on chronic pain care of sorts. Very difficult if it is a plane flight somewhere, especially if we are crossing countries, going to a different country. Those flights are very long, so those patients are really going to battle with that. So that would definitely need to be taken into consideration, whether it is worth putting their animal through that trip, because during the flight, they're not able to receive any medication. They are in the cargo hold. Nobody else is able to go in there and give them medication. They would only be able to get medication once they land in a midway country, sort of en route to where they're going. For car travel, for example, say if we were traveling from Durban to Cape Town, it is a very long trip in the car for those patients. You would definitely need to stop, I'd say probably at least every 2 to 3 hours to let that patient out of the car and stretch their legs. Obviously, this would be a very different circumstance if it were a cat. Obviously, we're not going to let them out the car, but certainly have an ability for them to come out of their crate, even if it's just to move along the back seat a little bit. They do need to stretch and move, and certainly have a little walk around if it now is a dog, but certainly also keep them on their chronic medication, whatever, if they need the dosage during the trip. But they definitely need to get up and move rather than sitting in one spot the entire trip, because they will definitely be very painful on the other side.
So let's talk about the car trip. Let's talk about packing for that car trip. What would you say are the essential items that owners need to take with them? Obviously, we've said that they need to have had a vet check and ensure that they are medically sound in order to travel. And with that, obviously, comes our recommendation of vaccinations.
Absolutely, yeah.
But are there legal requirements for having your pets vaccinated when you're traveling? Do you have to travel with a vaccination card? Like, what are the things you have to pack?
Yeah, so as far as I'm aware, Western Cape is the only one that stipulates that you have to present the vaccine card and up-to-date vaccination proof on crossing their border into the Western Cape. That was because they were sort of a rabies-free province. I've not heard of any other provinces stipulating that you do have to present vaccination cards on crossing the border, but if you are going into accommodation of any sort with your pet, they will definitely want to see vaccination records that your pets are up to date, because obviously it's not only them that are now at risk of your pets coming to visit if they're not fully vaccinated, but obviously staff and community around them, and they would technically be responsible because they've hosted you. So
particularly if there's an incident,
absolutely,
to say, look, my pet has been vaccinated,
exactly. So
particularly for rabies, maybe there's a bite that happens during the visit.
Run on the beach, bumped into somebody, or had an accident, and bit someone by mistake.
Okay, so the vaccination card is critical.
Absolute must.
What are the must-haves other than that?
So a form of leash, harness, whatever the case may be, your dog has to be under control at all times. So like I'd mentioned earlier, if you are stopping on the side of the road every couple of hours or so for stretching and toilet breaks and all of that, obviously you can't have your dog running around on the side of the road. So they must have a collar, must have a leash or a body harness. And with that, I would also stipulate have identification on a collar. We are seeing it a lot. Our roads are a nightmare in South Africa. Would never wish it upon anyone, but the likelihood of being in a car accident at some point is quite high. And animals get flung out of the car and they go running because they are so petrified of the car accident and what's just happened. And obviously, microchip is first and foremost. We also recommend that impeccably. But identification on a collar, people are able to contact you immediately if they've just happened to find it on the side of the road. They can contact a number and get hold of you.
Even in the event that they slip the lead. We've had that happen.
Yes, yeah. So identification, but also restraint. You absolutely must have either leash and collar or a harness and leash on the dogs. Cats must be kept in a basket during travel. We've also had that a dime a dozen. Open a car door if the cat's not correctly enclosed in a cat carrier. They escape out of the car, out an open window. It's happened over and over and over again, and that is incredibly sad because to find a missing cat is incredibly difficult, especially if you've traveled far from home. That cat does not know how to get home, and they are not easy to be caught. They're not easily seen. Dogs generally are easier to find.
And come to you.
Yeah, cats are very difficult. So at all costs to keep a cat very secure inside the car.
Hi there, pet parents. This is Dr. Cara, the Ultra Pet Vet. I'm excited to introduce Ultra Pet's premium recipe for miniature and small breeds. Ultra Pet's smaller kibble size combined with calcium and phosphorus helps keep their teeth in tip-top shape. We've added omega-3 to support their heart function while keeping your little one strong and healthy. Ultra Pet has included chondroitin, glucosamine, and green lip mussel extract to help your dog's joints and L-carnitine to manage weight. Prebiotics play a crucial role in maintaining a healthy digestive system by nourishing the good bacteria in your dog's gut. The best part? Ultra Pet offers a 100% money-back guarantee. Visit your local vet or pet store to make the switch now. So let's talk food and water. Do you advise owners feed during the journey, before the journey, wait until they arrive at their destination? What about food and water?
Yeah, so I would say that depends on the length of your trip. So if you are going on a very lengthy trip, I would say certainly a meal beforehand, but I would say it's got to be at least an hour before your trip so that the food has had time to pass through the stomach, that we don't have a big stomach full of food. Firstly, because also a lot of animals suffer from car sickness or just stress in the car, and that can make them vomit. So if you've got a nice big stomach full of food that they've just eaten, it is going to be all over your car in 5 seconds flat. So certainly a smaller meal, but at least an hour before the trip. Once again, depending on the length of the trip, whether you would need to feed in between. If you're driving to Cape Town in one fell swoop, that's and over 12 hours. I'm not sure what it takes these days, 14 hours. So I would definitely recommend some food during the course of that trip as well. But I would then have a good stop on the side of the road at a petrol station, have a good stretch of the legs, have a nice drink of water, have a meal, and
small meal, perhaps.
Yeah,
smaller than
very
normal.
Just a nibble basically, but just to satiate them and for the rest of the trip, because we once again don't want to start traveling with a full stomach again.
Absolutely.
But certainly something to just tide them over until you reach your destination. Water, I think, is vitally important. Dogs can get very anxious and pant a lot during the course of a trip. And they're expelling moisture at a rate of knots. So certainly have to supplement that and keep them hydrated throughout the trip. So regardless of them being an arthritic patient or painful and needing a stretch, I do think it is vital on longer trips to stop every 2 to 3 hours to let a dog out of a car.
This is toilet breaks.
Yes, yeah. And have a drink of water at that time frame. So they don't understand the concept of travel, like, oh, we've just got to get there. It's 4 hours away.
Hold your bladder.
They don't know. Yeah. So important to let them out frequently along the road, but obviously in safe areas. Leash them up, harness them up, and let them have a little stretch and a drink of water.
Absolutely. So before we go into some of the things you can do to manage some of the nausea and the stress and the effects of traveling for some pets, let's talk just generally about the kind of environment you want to travel in. Like, are we talking, you want to keep the aircon on? Where would they be? In the front or the back of the car? I know you made mention of the crates. What is the advisable if in an ideal situation you can get a crate? Where would you be putting that crate?
So most crates, or certainly the ones that are certified, you actually get ones that are certified that they will survive a car accident, and they are licensed to be placed in the boot. It is the way the cage faces and how it is connected into the car, that they are designed to go into the boot of the car with the dog's face or the door of the cage facing the boot door, so that essentially facing backwards. Though if you're not able to use the boot or get the crate in the boot, then the same sort of rules apply as if you were traveling with a child, that they are to be behind the driver side seat on the back seat. I do not recommend dogs or cats on front seats. They can be distracting. If they were to climb out or get out of wherever the first place they're headed to is to you.
Your lap.
Yeah, and if you're the driver, that is an accident waiting to happen. So ideally start in the boot, back seat, not the front seat.
Yeah.
Unless you've got a super well-traveled dog that just parks on the front seat. He's been doing it all his life. But in an accident, that is also a very dangerous place for a dog to be.
Absolutely.
Because they're not seat belted in as we are. There are methods of securing them, but they are certainly safer in the back seat rather than the front.
That's great advice. And in terms of, I'm talking about this because obviously we've just got this new cattery that's open, and I've been investigating sort of playing cat-friendly music. I wasn't aware of that before, I must be honest, and I'm cat crazy.
Yeah.
But do you think that would be useful in the car? I mean, obviously,
Absolutely.
I know everybody wants to listen to their own tunes. And there's a fight whose music you're going to listen to, but does that make a difference for some of the pets?
No, it absolutely does. That has actually been scientifically proven that it does work, but it does tend to drive everybody else in the car a little bit wild, that they're listening to the same, because it is a very monotonous but very rhythmic, calming tune. But yeah, if you're on a long trip with said cat music, it can be a little bit boring and monotonous for the driver, but it is definitely proven for the cats traveling that it is beneficial for them. There is also dog allocated music, and I've seen that work a bomb.
Very
literally
cool.
sleep the entire trip.
So let's talk about those really anxious pets. What are the sort of things, or what's the advice you would give practically and potentially sort of in terms of medication that you can give in order to try and help manage the situation?
Yeah. So anxious behavior in a car can come from either just purely being anxious about traveling, being in the car, where are we going, what are we doing, this is new, I don't understand it, but also dogs that feel motion sickness, it can present as anxiety. Or they start feeling anxious about the car because they know that they're going to feel very sick shortly thereafter. Motion sickness doesn't normally occur within the first couple of minutes of the drive. It comes. So dogs can anticipate that they know getting in the car, it's going to make me feel ill. Now I'm getting anxious because now I'm in the car and I know I'm going to feel really cruddy later on. So it sort of depends on where that anxiety is stemming from. Some dogs just purely hate traveling in a car. Cats, 90% of them hate traveling in a car. They will all scream and wail the entire length of the trip. So starting off, I do recommend all animals, all pets should be somewhat car trained when you first acquire them as a puppy and a kitten. It sounds daft, but it works. The more they get used to it, the more they understand it's not a terrible thing every time. Some dogs only ever get in the car to go to the vet, and they automatically associate a car ride with being a horrible thing, don't want to do it. So ensure that once you get a puppy and a kitten, short little drives.
Somewhere nice.
Yeah, and it can even just be starting around the block. Some puppies will show really early on that they're going to be car sick. So from a couple of weeks of age, they'll start vomiting every time they're in the car. And those guys, you need to do short little driving stints. I mean, literally drive out your driveway, 100 meters up the road, turn around, come back, get the puppy out the car and praise him to death for being an angel in the car. Motion sickness can be worked through. And the more frequently they get in the car and don't have sick episodes, and they're able to sort of see out the window, get a bit of fresh air in their face, you can work through it. A lot of dogs outgrow it by the time they're sort of between 6 and 8 months of age. So just to work through it, but in that time frame, you have developed sort of a understanding that the car is not a bad place to be.
Positive associations.
Yeah, and you'll then far less likely have an anxious dog in the car.
Absolutely.
And
there are medications that we can give as vets and we can prescribe.
No, absolutely.
I mean, a bit like giving your child a car sickness. It makes such a difference.
Exactly, yeah. So there is medication available specifically for motion sickness in animals. So, you would just need to speak to your veterinary practice and inform them, that you're going on a trip, and whichever pet it is always vomits in the car, could you please have something for the motion sickness? They'd gladly dispense that for
That
you.
makes such a difference, like long term.
Exactly. Yeah. I've had to use it on my own dogs. All of mine were car sick as puppies, and I travel everywhere with my dogs. So,
and you don't have to use it every time.
No.
Like you said, you get to a point where they go, okay, now I'm not associating it with that.
Yes.
And the following trips are generally medication free.
Yeah. And for those guys that are in general just really anxious or really dangerous in the car, if they're jumping around all over the place and not able to settle, then we are able to prescribe certain sedatives or some calming medication for the dogs and cats that need it. If you've got a really frantic dog in the car that, as I say, can be quite dangerous, or it's just got a long trip ahead of you, then there are other sedatives that we can also use as well, but then we might require a vet visit for that because they are scheduled medications that we'd use. At the end of the day, we just need to check them out and make sure they're healthy, that they can actually handle that sedation. Once again, that's not for flying. That would be purely for driving. But that will just take a load of anxiety off of them, and they will probably sleep majority of the trip.
Absolutely. What a pleasure.
Yeah.
So now we've got to our destination. What are the sort of things that you can do to help settle your pet in?
Once again, the sort of the natural calming tablets that we can prescribe prior to a trip is sort of at least generally a couple of days prior to going or starting the trip. You would continue those throughout sort of the first few days of them arriving in the new destination. That definitely helps keep them calm and settled. There are also pheromone sprays that we can use for both dogs and cats. Those you would sort of spray in the environment, and it makes the whole environment a happy place for both dogs and cats. They are specific pheromones, so you would need to buy of each if you're taking everybody. But those definitely work. And then anything that's familiar from home. So their blankets, their beds, their toys. You obviously, if you are able to take their beds and toys with them, specifically blankets, that helps them settle right in. That there's a sense of familiarity. They've not just disappeared into a weird and wonderful place.
And how important is routine?
Absolutely, yeah.
So would you keep like feeding times the same, walking?
As best you can.
So try and stick to what they're familiar with.
Exactly, yeah. So within whatever your destination allows, try and keep their routine as dead set as it had always been at home. Change in routine can cause so much anxiety in an animal, and it would just be exacerbated by the fact that it's now in another place. So definitely keep to routine as best as possible.
And to those people who are wanting to travel, would you encourage it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a great experience.
No, 100%. I love traveling with my animals. If I could take them everywhere with me, I would. But certainly majority of my holidays, the animals come with me. So, they had always started from young, beach trips for the day or just going to the dog park. It now allows me or affords me that my dogs are 100% relaxed in the car. I can take them absolutely anywhere with me. That we don't have a freak out session when we get somewhere else because they are so used to going to new places as well. Absolutely. So if it becomes a habit for them and they thoroughly enjoy going on holiday with you, it's always been a fun experience, they love it. All I have to say to my dogs is we're going tatas, and they know we're going on a holiday. They are gung-ho, rearing for the car. They can't wait for me to open that boot, and they're in there.
Absolutely. They're great. They're even on the back of our van because they're so used to getting into.
Yeah, exactly. So, my dogs are very familiar, and it's a very pleasant experience. And then I don't need to worry about my dogs when I go on holiday because they're with me.
Absolutely. And I mean, we obviously have our cattery set up here now at Hillcrest Vets. One of the things we're talking to owners about who are going away with their cats is they've got to obviously ensure that they don't let them out. Because I think people feel that, because they travel with their dogs, they can let them in the garden. They cannot do that with cats.
Yeah, no, that is... I have heard of maybe 2 or 3 cats in my lifetime that people have managed to take on holiday with them. They open the door at the caravan park and the cat doesn't leave. And my mind is blown.
Unless you can put them on a harness and lead.
That is not the norm.
No.
So taking a cat to another place and letting them go, you're basically just setting them free to never see them again. So yes, harnesses and leashes on a cat. I would test that to high heavens before you go anywhere because cats are masters of getting out of things. I wouldn't advise taking cats on holidays unless you have one of those 3 cats in the world that just gets out the car and doesn't go anywhere.
With chills on.
Yeah. It's frightening. It's not the norm with cats.
No.
So I would definitely not advise taking cats on holidays. They're also certainly more anxious on car trips and things like that. They're not the same as dogs. They don't interact the same with us as dogs do. So for them, it is definitely a better option. Go into a safe cattery. Like we've got the pheromones, we've got all the calming aspects here in our cattery, so the cats are super calm and relaxed in our environment. You've got veterinary staff looking after them. That is a far safer and relaxing option for you.
Absolutely. You can go away and enjoy your holiday and not have the stress
not
of
worrying about the cat.
losing your cat. It's terrible. Thank you. That's really great advice. I really appreciate you taking time out of your very busy day.
Pleasure.
My goodness, I'm now seeing your schedule for the afternoon. You haven't even eaten anything yet, so thank you.
It's all right. It's good for the rest life.
Always appreciate your time and advice.
Anytime.
It's great. Sister Cat.
Sure. Thanks.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode on the Pause and Effect podcast. If you found the discussion helpful, please like, share, and follow our podcasts. Don't forget to leave us a comment or review. We love hearing from our listeners. Remember, you can listen to us on your preferred podcast platform. Welcome back to Just for Pets. You're with Dr. Cara.
Hello, Doctor. It's Chanel the Persian. And, I can't seem to stop retching to get this hairball up.
Are you on a special diet?
Excuse me?
Hairball control food will really help. And maybe some Laxapet. And lucky for you, Just for Pets have a big range.
Well, how early can I get some?
Order today and we'll deliver pronto.
Wow, I feel better already.
Justforpets.co.za. Vet approved, pet adored. Get it all to your door.